And the Oscar goes to...
The Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes
to... We've done the first, we've done the 50th, now it's time to do the 25th Academy Awards from 1953, March 19th to be exact. That was held at the RKO Pantages Theatre in Hollywood, as well as NBC International Theatre in New York City. And it was the first televised Oscars as well, so you can trace the televised roots back to this year, 1953. It was also the first to be held both in Hollywood and New York City at the same time. I don't know if they did that again. Definitely not in the last several years. A very major upset. This is the big story from the 1953 Oscars. Major upset as High Noon was really heavily favored to win Best Picture. But it lost to Cecil B. DeMille's The Greatest Show on Earth, a movie about the circus, basically. And because of that, The Greatest Show on Earth is considered among the worst Best Picture winners of all time. That's saying something right there. We'll see if I believe that or not, coming up in our review soon. Now, The Quiet Man was also up for Best Picture that year. So High Noon, one of the, you see it on top 20 lists all the time of Best Movie of all time. The Quiet Man you see on many top 100 lists or even top 50 lists at times too. You don't really see The Greatest Show on Earth on those lists very much. So I guess definitely an upset when you're talking about history and stuff. Well, The Bad and Beautiful won 5 awards. That was the most wins for a film ever not nominated for Best Picture. We're not going to review that one, but it was heavily nominated that year. This was also the last year where the Best Picture winner won just 2 Oscars. That, of course, until Spotlight won only Best Picture and Screenplay at the 88th Awards a couple years back. Shirley Booth was the last person to win an Oscar in a leading role to be born in the 19th century. The first woman in her 50s to win the award as well. She was 54 at the time. And it was John Ford's 4th win in Best Director. That set the record for the most wins in that category, and that remains unmatched. John Ford is the winningest director at the Academy Awards as far as Best Director goes. And for the first time in Oscar history, all 4 acting Oscars, Best Director and Best Picture, went to 6 completely different films. That was the first time it happened. It happened 3 times since, though, in 1956, 2005, and 2012. And the honorary awards at this year's Oscars went to George Alfred Mitchell, Joseph M. Schenck, Marion C. Cooper, Harold Lloyd, and Bob Hope. Bob Hope, of course, hosted the Oscars for so many years. The Irving Thalberg Award went to Cecil B. DeMille. And Mary Pickford presented the Best Picture. Janet Gaynor presented Best Actor. Frederick March presented Best Actress. Kind of an interesting tidbit here. Bob Hope, of course, was the host. He had to wear a blue dress shirt with his formal dinner jacket because white would have been too bright for a black and white television. And Shirley Booth was so excited when accepting her Academy Award for Best Actress that she tripped up the steps. Who does that sound like? Jennifer Lawrence from a few years back. It was a real late broadcast, too, for the East Coast. It was broadcast from 10:30 until midnight, switching back and forth from the West Coast to the East Coast. Bob Hope, of course, was on the West Coast. Conrad Nagel was on the East Coast. And it had a late start to accommodate the nominees performing that night on Broadway. They had to get through their acts, I guess, and then boom, there they are, accepting awards and whatnot. So as far as the biggest winners of the night, The Bad and the Beautiful had 5 wins, as I mentioned. High Noon did have 4 wins. It didn't win Best Picture, but it did have 4 other wins. Greatest Show on Earth, Moulin Rouge, and The Quiet Man all had 2. And there are 5 movies that were nominated for Best Picture to review. They are the winner, The Greatest Show on Earth, High Noon, Ivanhoe, Moulin Rouge, and The Quiet Man. So let's get to it.
Children of all ages, John Ringling North welcomes you to the greatest show on earth.
We start with the Best Picture Oscar winner for the 1953 Academy Awards, The Greatest Show on Earth, an American drama film that was shot in Technicolor and released by Paramount. It was produced and directed by Cecil B. DeMille and set in the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. Lots of circus scenes in this movie. The whole thing's about the circus, of course, but you see lots of acts going on in the 2.5 hours or so of the runtime in this movie. It stars Betty Hutton as Holly, Cornell Wilde as the Great Sebastian, Charlton Heston as Brad Braden, and James Stewart as Buttons the Clown in a cameo role. Maybe not a cameo, a little more than a cameo, I should say a supporting role. And the gist of the story, Holly and the Great Sebastian are trapeze artists competing for the center ring. Buttons the Clown never removes his makeup, even before and after shows. And Brad Braden is the circus manager running the show. Dorothy Lamour and Gloria Graham also play supporting roles in the film. That's the film in a nutshell. No pun intended. Now, the real Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's Circus 1951 troupe actually appears in the film. 1,400 people and hundreds of animals and 60 carloads of equipment and tents are all in this film. It was a big-time undertaking, and the actors who weren't in the circus actually learned their respective circus roles and participated. When you watch Betty Hutton, she's on that ring. She does a great job. So they had to be very, very athletic as well. Cornell Wilde, too, had to be very athletic to be able to pull off those feats from the movie. I'm assuming they probably had some stunt people do some of the really death-defying stuff, but a lot of that's them, you can see. The movie's known for lavish production values, actual circus acts, and kind of documentary behind-the-scenes looks at the massive logistics effort that goes behind putting on the circus back in the 1950s. The movie won Best Picture and Best Story as well, and that's always a point of contention because it beat out High Noon, it beat out The Quiet Man, and it beat out, Singing in the Rain didn't even get a nomination that year, even though it would have been eligible for the 1953 Academy Awards. So those are three movies that a lot of people widely consider to be much better than The Greatest Show on Earth, but there were things going on at the time with the McCarthy hearings and all that stuff, where they just wanted, I guess, just play it safe and have a good old-fashioned Americana kind of movie to win Best Picture that year. A lot of unbilled cameos, too, sitting in the crowd. During one scene especially, I remember seeing Bob Hope sitting there just eating, watching the circus. Bing Crosby also in the movie, and William Boyd, Hopalong Cassidy, Danny Thomas, Van Heflin, Leon Ames, all in the movie. So they're all over the place. You can kind of spot the cameos. Kind of fun to do in retrospect. And a fun fact here, Gloria Graham, who is in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, who plays Violet, stars alongside James Stewart in this movie too, but her role originally was offered to Lucille Ball. But Lucille Ball was pregnant at the time and couldn't fulfill her role. As far as the movie's reception, Bosley Crowther said it was a lusty triumph of circus showmanship and movie skill. Time magazine called it a mammoth merger of two masters of malarkey, Cecil B. DeMille and, of course, P.T. Barnum. Variety called it effectively serving its purpose. So it really doesn't really withhold the test of time as far as the critical reviews. The later reviews says, not really the movie that they thought it was in the 1950s. Now, the other conspiracy theories of why this movie won Best Picture, aside from the McCarthyism stuff, is that kind of the Oscars may have wanted to reward Cecil B. DeMille for his years of work, knowing that this probably would be his last or near his last movie. He's wrapping up his career, and they kind of wanted to reward him. So there's that school of thought as well as the McCarthyism school of thought. I'm thinking it may have been probably McCarthyism a little bit. High Noon, we'll get into High Noon coming up in just a bit, but High Noon was considered a little bit of a nod, for whatever reason, to communism, and I don't know why, but we'll get into that. So let's go through our review now of The Greatest Show on Earth. For plot, I only give the plot a 2 out of 5. Extremely simplistic plot with a sparse kind of love story. It doesn't really tug on your heartstrings, this love triangle story between Betty Hutton's character, Cornell Wilde's character, and Charlton Heston's character. It's just kind of movie fluff and a lot of overacting and over-emotions in this plot. The best part of the plot, I think, was the Buttons the Clown plot. Of course, Buttons played by James Stewart, where he plays a clown that never takes off his makeup, and it is uncovered that he's actually wanted for murdering his wife, performing a mercy killing on his wife, and he ran away and joined the circus, and it's kind of an interesting subplot to me. However, there's unending breaks in this film. Whereas the plot is a vehicle for the music in a musical, this is a vehicle to showcase the circus acts on the big screen, and that's why it doesn't really withhold the test of time to me. Acting, I give only a 1.5 out of 5. I mean, you had some big-name actors in this, including James Stewart, including Charlton Heston. Heston was extremely wooden and stiff, without conveying much emotion as well. He's just this cold character throughout, and very unlikable as well. I know we're supposed to see him as this strong circus business guy, but it doesn't come off very well. I think James Stewart, who I thought was the actor that could have saved this movie, I just even think that he really couldn't turn up much of his usual charm in this film. It just didn't seem like the same James Stewart that we're used to. A lot of overacting and a lot of one-liners, kind of like running gags and stuff like that in the movie. Maybe not gags, but just one-liners and insult comic stuff. And I just wasn't a big fan of the overall acting. Directing and cinematography, I do give a 3 out of 5. I really thought that for what it set out to do, it captured the spectacle really, really well on the big screen. The train crash, even though when you're looking at the train crash in 2017, you obviously can tell it's a model train crash. However, when you look at it on the big screen, I actually did see it in a movie theater a while back on the big screen. It is pretty overwhelming, and it really transfers to the big screen a lot better than it transfers to the small screen. And they do a good job with the suspense of that scene as well. So that is something that is very, very, very well done. The fun crowd cameos, too. I like the crowd cameos with the stars. Had much more impact probably when the stars were more relevant, obviously, in the 1950s to people watching the film. Soundtrack, I do give a 4 out of 5. I thought the circus music was great. I thought, the scenes of peril, the music really fit those scenes too. So great job with the soundtrack. And overall aura, I give the highest score for this film. I give a 4.5 out of 5 for overall aura. It's a movie that I remember. I've seen it a couple times, and it's a movie that really does stick in my mind. Train crash scene, really probably first and foremost. The scene where Cornel Wilde's character falls off the bars and gets injured really, really sticks out in my mind. The music sticks out in my mind, and it made me go on Wikipedia and look at the history of the circus and all the trials and tribulations. So it really made me want to study further as well. So it had that kind of lasting impact. So let's go through the complete review. We have 2 for plot, 1.5 for acting, 3 for directing and cinematography, 4 for soundtrack, 4.5 for aura, giving The Greatest Show on Earth a total of 15 out of 25 for a score of 60.
The judges left town, Harvey's quit, and I'm having trouble getting deputies.
People gotta talk themselves into law and order before they do anything about it. Maybe because down deep they don't care. They just don't care.
I think you better go while there's still time. It's better for you, and it's better for us.
It's the 1952 American Western film High Noon, one of the movies that's on a lot of top 20 lists, top 10 lists even, for best movie of all time. It was directed by Fred Zinnemann, who also directed From Here to Eternity, Oklahoma, and A Man for All Seasons. Just a little bit of his resume there, so he's got some acclaimed movies under his belt. This movie stars Gary Cooper as Marshal Will Kane, also Thomas Mitchell, who you may remember as Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life. Lloyd Bridges, we all know Lloyd Bridges. He plays Deputy Marshal Harvey Dell. Katie Jurado plays Helen Ramirez. And, of course, an early appearance by Grace Kelly in the film as well. Screenplay was written by Carl Foreman. Gary Cooper won Best Actor for his role. Also, the movie won Best Editing, Music Score, and Music Song as well. And the first year that the National Film Registry came into existence, it was put in there, 1989. High Noon's been described as a straight remake of a 1929 film version of The Virginian, and the plot centers around a marshal personally compelled to face a returning deadly enemy who finds that his own town refuses to help him. He just gets married and thought that all would be cake from there on in, and it really wasn't. Now, as I mentioned when we went through the ceremony of the 1953 Oscars, this movie was upset by The Greatest Show on Earth for Best Picture. And a lot of people think that it's because Foreman, who wrote the screenplay, was called into the House Un-American Activities Committee during the filming of this movie, and it actually ruined his career. He was not hired for any other Hollywood films after this. John Wayne originally was offered the lead role, but he turned it down, possibly because of the Foreman situation. Apparently, Wayne may have believed that Foreman's story was an allegory against blacklisting. Now, this year, of course, was the year that The Quiet Man also came out, which John Wayne starred in. So maybe there was some conflict there as well. The role also was offered to Gregory Peck, but Peck felt that it was similar to his role in the 1950s movie The Gunfighter. Charlton Heston, Kirk Douglas, Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, Burt Lancaster, they all also turned down the role, too. Grace Kelly was cast after Stanley Kramer saw her in an off-Broadway play. Kelly and Cooper actually had an affair during the filming. Now, she was 21 and he was 50, so a big age difference right there. Aside from Kelly's debut in the film, it was also the debut of actor Lee Van Cleef, who plays Jack Colby from the villainous gang. It was filmed over several locations in California, and Gary Cooper had several health problems during this movie. Now, he would be dead within 10 years. I believe 1960 or 1961 is when Gary Cooper died, so he died in his early 60s, I believe, but at a relatively young age, I guess, when you think of it. But he did have several health problems, including a bleeding ulcer and pain in his back as well during filming for this. And as far as the reception for High Noon, it was criticized by a lot of its audiences. They were kind of programmed to thinking Westerns are going to be one way, going to have this lush kind of scenery in this film, and there's going to be tons of action, but there really wasn't. It was more of a cerebral movie, I guess you can call it. Really didn't have those picture postcard scenes and lots of chases and fights, not too much of that going on. So people kind of panned the film because of that. So with the Foreman issue, you had a lot of people kind of thinking, hey, this is a communist movie. But also the Soviet Union did not like this film as well because the film was criticized as a glorification of the individual. So it couldn't win back then. It's amazing. When John Wayne saw the movie, he called it the most un-American thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't get why. I don't know why they would view this as an allegory for being un-American or an allegory for communism. It's just that the nation was kind of in hysteria back then as far as this stuff goes. So let's get into our review now of High Noon. As far as the plot goes, I give the plot a perfect score, 5 out of 5. I thought it was a spectacular story of someone in a time of need, not getting any support from friends, people who had been there for him before, and basically he was on his own and had to make the decision by himself with no help pretty much whatsoever, and really kind of a good story about standing up for yourself in the fight. You can't run away from everything, and your problems are basically going to catch up with you at some point. Also, great suspense in the plot, even though there's no real, there's not tons of chases and fights, as I mentioned before. It really captures the suspense from beginning to end, and I believe the events kind of happen somewhat in real time. I mean, the movie starts at, like 10:40 and ends up at noon, whereas, the runtime of the movie is a little north of 80 minutes long. It's a short movie, all in all. Acting, I give a 4 out of 5. I think Gary Cooper, that's basically his quintessential role. He was great in that role. Very believable, very cerebral in his, kind of living in his mind, worried, trying to think about what kind of choices he's going to make. He was great in this. I thought Lloyd Bridges was great as well, as kind of a drunk, unreliable deputy who basically just wants... He's a little bit hurt in that when Cooper's character retires, he thought that he was going to be the rightful sheriff of town, but Cooper recommended someone else. He was upset about that, tries to cut a deal with him. He wouldn't take the deal, so he decides not to help Cooper out. So he was basically in it for himself right there. I thought the female roles, Gerardo and Kelly, fairly okay. They were all right. They weren't, barn burning or anything, but there's a good scene between the two of them where they interact, and they're both considering fleeing town for two different reasons. Directing and cinematography, I give a 5 out of 5. The desolateness really works so much better for this film rather than like the lush, beautiful landscapes that you usually get from Western films. Lots of really great crane shots as well. There's an iconic scene where he's basically all alone in the town, and there's a crane shot overhead of this town, and you can see him just standing by himself, basically. He's all alone in the world, taking on this gang. And the funny thing about that scene, too, is the fact that you can see power lines. One of the great movie flubs, I guess. You can see power lines off in the distance, which shouldn't have been back in that time. And the clocks, another allusion to the clocks. They're bigger and bigger and bigger as the movie wears on and the time gets closer and closer. Really good symbolism right there. Soundtrack and sound editing, I gave a 4 out of 5. I thought the song, the main theme song, was one that will get stuck in your head for a long time. Also, a lot of incidental Western themes in the movie as well. So they really helped and played a role. And overall aura of High Noon, I give this a 4 out of 5. I thought the train and just waiting on the train to come at high noon was really kind of what was ingrained in my head with this. The sense of danger, the time passing, or kind of watching it as it's going on. And the feeling of loneliness and making choices as well really is at the forefront of this film. So tallying up the results, 5 for plot, 4 for acting, 5 for directing and cinematography, 4 for soundtrack, 4 for aura, giving High Noon a total of 22 out of 25 for a score of 88.
Ivanhoe brings to the screen a romance that has grown immortal. An epic of gallantry, intrigue, and adventure in the tumultuous days of England's crusaders. Sir Walter Scott, the great storyteller, gathers his characters together at the tournament at Ashby.
Okay, the 1952 swashbuckling adventure film Ivanhoe, directed by Richard Thorpe and produced by Pendro S. Berman for MGM. Now, we've done a few Pendro S. Berman films. He was a legend of the screen back in the day. It stars Robert Taylor, iconic Robert Taylor, as Sir Wilfrid of Ivanhoe. Elizabeth Taylor, no relation, although I believe weren't they married or something like that. In one of her early roles, she plays Rebecca. Joan Fontaine plays Rowena, and George Sanders plays Sir Brian de Bois Guilbert. Also in the movie, Emlyn Williams, Finlay Currie, and Felix Aylmer. The screenplay was by Aeneas Mackenzie, Marguerite Roberts, and Noel Langley, and it was based on the historical novel Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. It was the first in an unofficial trilogy that was made by the same director, producer, and star, Robert Taylor. Knights of the Round Table was in 1953. Then you had Adventures of Quentin Durward in 1955. Now, as we mentioned before in past reviews, this, of course, was the blacklisting era of American film, which kind of brought up the controversy of why The Greatest Show on Earth won Best Picture that year. But Marguerite Roberts, one of the screenplay writers, was actually blacklisted by the House Un-American Committee during filming of this. So her name was completely taken off any kind of recognition for this film, even though she had a lot to do with it, which definitely not fair. As far as the plot goes of Ivanhoe, in the center of the Walter Scott classic fiction inspired film, the chivalrous and daring Ivanhoe, who's a disowned knight, he joins the brave-hearted and high-minded Robin Hood, the valiant of Forest Sherwood, and they want King Richard to rule the kingdom instead of evil Prince John. King Richard is held by a captor for a ransom. They're trying to rescue King Richard, and a lot of action and adventure scenes ensue. So let's get to the overall review now of Ivanhoe. As far as the plot goes, I give the plot a 2 out of 5. Lots of characters, and very, very tough for me to kind of pick through them. I never read the novel, so I don't have that kind of background, so I can't really compare it to the novel. And the plot, the novel may be great and easy to follow, and one of the best novels of all time. I don't know. I've never read it. However, I felt it kind of murky as far as the number of characters, whose side is who on, alliances, enemies. It was really hard to kind of figure out because I didn't really know the history of it and the backstory of it. And it wasn't really explained much in the movie, almost that you had to know the history between the Normans and the Saxons. Robin Hood, of course, was a character in this. I didn't really understand that he was until later, and he wasn't really a huge part of the movie. It centered more around Robert Taylor's character, of course, Wilfrid of Ivanhoe. Overall acting, I give a 3 out of 5. I thought some of the older actors really did a good job playing Wilfrid of Ivanhoe's father. The actor who played him was very good and very convincing. Also, the actor who played Rebecca's father, also very, very good in his role, too. I thought both Taylors, Robert and Elizabeth, were kind of pedestrian in this role. Elizabeth Taylor just kind of seemed a little distant. Robert Taylor just seemed kind of a run-of-the-mill action star. Nothing real to him. I know he was big back in the day, but I just don't see anything to really round out his character in this film. Directing and cinematography, I give a 3 out of 5. I thought there was some decent scenery, especially the nighttime scenery. I know 1952, probably not the easiest thing to film night back then. I'm sure some of it was treated as far as the film goes, but really nice starlit skies over the castles and stuff like that, really well done. Overall, though, I think you just kind of get your normal run-of-the-mill swashbuckling themes and swashbuckling scenes as well. Uneventful, sword fighting. The sword fighting scenes don't really stand the test of time too much. I guess they were adventurous and exciting back then, but not today. Soundtrack, I give a 3 out of 5. I thought the decent medieval music kind of helped out the movie. Unmemorable score, but it did kind of create a good background and a good helping to the story and to the scenery as well. Overall aura, though, 1.5 out of 5. I think it's a deeply forgettable film. One thing I guess that stands through my mind or in my mind is the tournament on the horseback, the knights jousting and stuff like that. But again, how many movies have that in them? That wasn't even too memorable, but that's the one thing I walked away from, and being known, I guess, for one of Elizabeth Taylor's kind of early roles as well. So tallying up the results now of our review of Ivanhoe, 2 for plot, a 3 for acting, 3 for directing and cinematography, 3 for soundtrack, 1.5 for aura, giving it a total of 12.5 out of 25 for a score of 50.
The story of shameless, seductive Paris, all her loves, ladies, her lusty legends. And Toulouse-Lautrec, the man who loved her and gave her immortality.
It's Moulin Rouge, the 1952 British drama film, not to be confused with the musical from, I believe, 2001. This film was directed by John Huston and produced by John and James Wolfe for their Romulus Film Company. The screenplay was by Huston, and it was also based on the novel by Pierre Lamour. Cinematography by Oswald Morris, and it stars Jose Ferrer as the title character, or maybe not the title character, but the main character, Henry de Toulouse-Lautrec. Zsa Zsa Gabor is in the film as well. She plays Jane Averill. Suzanne Flon plays Miriam Hayam. Eric Pullman plays Picard. And also in the movie, Colette Marchand, Christopher Lee, Michael Baker, Peter Cushing, Kath, and Theodore Bickel. They're also there. Peter Cushing, kind of a surprise role. I didn't know he was in the film until I saw it, and I said, hey, that's General Tarkin from the Star Wars movies now. As far as the plot goes, Henry de Toulouse-Lautrec frequently visits the Moulin Rouge, where he drinks cognac. And does he ever drink cognac? We're talking bottle after bottle after bottle of, I'm assuming, 80-proof liquor. He had a little bit of a drinking problem. He draws sketches of the dancers and singers while he's drinking, and his personal life is very unhappy as a result of a deformed leg due to a childhood fall. A spirited young woman of the street, Marie, asks him for help. He falls in love with her. They become involved in a tumultuous relationship, and it's more difficult for him to balance his personal feelings, artistic abilities, and family name and position. So he's a tormented soul, and that's basically what this film kind of depicts. As far as the production, it was shot at Shepperton Studios in Shepperton, Surrey, England. Ferrer received 40% of the proceeds, which kind of led to a big court case, a Second Circuit tax case where Ferrer argued that he was taxed too much, getting just 40% of, I guess, what he thought he was owed, or I guess the bottom line. So let's get into our review now of Moulin Rouge. Okay, having seen this movie, I give the plot a 4 out of 5. I thought it was a really kind of heartbreaking story of a talent that was torn apart by love. And a lot of times some of the best artwork comes from pain. And this is a big-time example of that. Toulouse-Lautrec had some of his greatest paintings done after this torment of his personal life, in which he almost commits suicide in one scene as well by turning the gas in his house up that was used to light lamps back in the early 1900s. The movie kind of tackles inbreeding as well a little bit. He falls and cripples himself, and they said that his bones are kind of brittle due to the fact that he is the son of two of his cousins, or two of his, I guess, great cousins, or whatever you want to call them. I would have liked a little more about the Moulin Rouge itself and the showmanship of the Moulin Rouge. There's a few show scenes that are very well done with the music and all that stuff. I would have liked a little more of that, a little more of the showmanship. The storyline behind Toulouse-Lautrec was very well done, but just a little bit of the other stuff to offset that I thought would have been better. Acting, I give a 3.5 out of 5. I thought Jose Ferrer was really good as Toulouse-Lautrec. The stunted legs looks a little bit awkward. It almost looks like he's walking on his knees a little bit at times. He saunters around. He's very slow. But if you look at pictures of Toulouse-Lautrec, he looks just like him. I mean, really just an uncanny resemblance. He did a good job playing him. Colette Marchand, I think, shines as a love interest in the film. And I thought Zsa Zsa Gabor was a little bit shaky in the role. It wasn't really a fleshed out role as it could have been. Directing and cinematography, I give a perfect score, 5 out of 5. I thought it was really ahead of its time, especially the color and the vibrancy of this film. Really kind of sets you back to Paris back in the early 20th century. And a lot of uses of painting. There's a lot of scenes, or at least a couple scenes, I should say, that show you the artwork from Toulouse-Lautrec. And corresponding with the music, really well done, almost like a gallery while you're watching this film. I really like the crowds at the Moulin Rouge, the debauchery kind of that goes on during those scenes, and really just a great depiction overall of Paris, I believe, at the turn of the century. Overall soundtrack, I give a 4 out of 5. I thought it was an excellent score with the Moulin Rouge scenes. A lot of the Can Can song and the song that Zsa Zsa Gabor sings basically stand out for me. Plenty of Parisian songs to bump up the feel of that it takes place in France. And overall, Laura, I give a perfect score. I give this movie a 5 out of 5. I thought it was a sad movie, yet very, very encapsulating, I believe. I think it's amazing how someone so depressed can produce something so beautiful, and the artwork was amazing, but you really just end up just feeling for this guy and the anguish that he goes on, that he just basically takes out on the bottle. I mean, he's just drinking and basically drinks himself to death. The Can scene, something that really comes to the forefront of my mind when I think of this film as well. So, tallying up the results now of Moulin Rouge from 1952. Plot a 4, acting a 3.5, directing and cinematography a 5, soundtrack a 4, aura a 5, giving Moulin Rouge a total of 21.5 out of 25 for a score of 86.
I'd like to tell you about The Quiet Man. He's John Wayne in a picture you'll soon be cheering.
The Technicolor American romantic comedy drama, The Quiet Man, from 1952, a film directed by John Ford, who up until that point had mostly directed westerns, starring the star of this movie, John Wayne, who plays Sean Thornton. Also, Maureen O'Hara plays Mary-Kate Danaher. Barry Fitzgerald as Micheline Oye-Flynn. Ward Bond, character actor from back in the day, very good one as well, plays Father Pete Lonergan. And Victor McLaglen, who we last saw at the Academy Awards in 1936 for that bruiser role in The Informer. He plays Squire Red Will Danaher, a screenplay by Fred Nugent, and it's based on a 1933 Saturday Evening Post short story of the same name by Maurice Walsh. And a notable movie for Winston Hoke's lush photography of the Irish countryside and a long climactic semi-comic fist fight, kind of the antithesis of High Noon. You had a lot of action and a lot of great scenery in this movie, whereas High Noon kind of stripped it down a little bit. And both these movies are widely considered two of the best of all time. High Noon ranked much higher usually on those lists than The Quiet Man, but The Quiet Man, more often than not, usually on a lot of top 100 film lists of all times. Ford did win Best Director for this movie, and the film itself won Best Cinematography, and it was selected for the preservation in the National Film Registry in 2013. As far as the plot of The Quiet Man, Sean Thornton has returned from America to reclaim his homestead and escape his past. He was a former boxer who killed somebody in the ring, of course accidentally, but he punched his lights out and killed him, and trying to get away from all that. Now his eye is caught by Mary-Kate Danaher, played by, of course, by the lovely Maureen O'Hara, who's a beautiful poor maiden and younger sister of ill-tempered Red Will Danaher. Now, the riotous relationship that forms between McGuire, Sean, and Mary-Kate, punctuated by Will's pugnacious attempts to keep them apart, form the main plot, with Sean's past as the dark undercurrents. That's the plot in a nutshell. Now, the movie actually was filmed mostly in Ireland, County Mayo and County Galway, I believe in the southern portion of Ireland, where the scenery is much more lush and beautiful. Innisfree is the fictitious community, and the movie represents Ford's depiction of an idealized Irish society. No real social divisions, no fights going on between the different classes, between the different religions, the Protestant sect and the Catholic part either, which you see so often. The very Irish score was composed by Victor Young, and Maureen O'Hara's family actually stated that she listened to the music from The Quiet Man in her final hours before she died not too long ago. So let's get into our review now of The Quiet Man. As far as the plot goes, I give the plot a 3.5 out of 5. I really like the overarching kind of culture battle between the American way of going about things and the Irish way of going about things, especially when it came to romance and the courtship ridiculousness from the Irish the value system. Also, it really kind of has two big themes as well that play against each other: the theme of principle and the theme of material. Now, the story is Maureen O'Hara's character is going to get married to Sean Thornton, but she has to have permission from her brother to do so, and she finally tricks her brother, or they finally trick her brother into allowing for the marriage, and he finds out it's a trick after they're married, and he won't give her monetary dowry. And she wants her monetary dowry not because of the money, but just because of the principle of the thing. So really interesting stuff. Also, you got that stranger in a strange land kind of mentality when John Wayne's character moves over. The one thing I would have liked to see more is a little more of a build-up of his backstory as a boxer. You see one little flashback scene of him killing that guy in the ring, and you kind of want a little more. You kind of want him to develop maybe a little more of an emotional connection to that scene than he ends up doing. As far as the acting goes, I give the acting a 3.5 out of 5. I thought Wayne and O'Hara were okay. They were good, but maybe a little bit wooden. I mean, John Wayne plays these types that are completely 100% good guy, bruiser kind of types with not too much depth in them. Maybe this is the movie that kind of showcased a little more depth than we're used to with John Wayne. He's a hero. O'Hara's good, as I mentioned. She's very stoic, which I guess is in tune with her character. I thought the character actors made the movie. They hired a lot of Irish character actors in Ireland, as a matter of fact, and they really made everything feel authentic. Now, it was the authentic Ireland where it was filmed, but also having those Irish character actors in there, I think, really made it that much more authentic. I thought Victor McLaglen was great as Danaher. What a great casting job. This big, giant, bruising, brawler kind of guy. It was just a perfect role for him. At directing and cinematography, I give a 4.5 out of 5. Scenery, absolutely spectacular. Great Irish countryside. There's a scene where he first moves into the cottage that he had just bought, and the wind's whipping up. It's kind of a windstorm. There's kind of gray clouds. The trees are whipping all over the place. Actually, that scene, he kisses Maureen O'Hara's character for the first time, and that scene actually is used in E.T. If you remember the scene where Elliot in E.T. is... all these weird things are happening because E.T. is like doing kind of mind control tricks, I guess, and Elliot kisses the girl while that scene's going on. The indoor sets were very well done, very consistent with Ireland. As far as the soundtrack goes, the soundtrack, very Irish, very good, 4 out of 5. A lot of songs, a lot of drinking songs and whatnot. A lot of drinking in the movie, as a matter of fact. And overall, Aura, I give a 4 out of 5. I think the things that really kind of are pinpointed in my mind. Number one, the epic dragging / fist fight scene where he heads to the train station to get Maureen O'Hara, and he's dragging her all throughout the fields, which would not work in 2017. There's a lot of domestic abuse kind of things going on with that scene. But back then, I guess it was hilarious. And of course, the fight between John Wayne and Victor McLaglen, and then they sit down, have a drink, and then continue fighting. Very good pub scenes, the whole story about the property, the fight over the property, the fight over the dowry, and that stuff really kind of is ingrained into my mind. So tabulating the results, 3.5 for plot, we have 3.5 for acting, 4.5 for directing and cinematography, 4 for soundtrack, and 4 for aura, giving The Quiet Man a total of 19.5 out of 25 for a score of 78.
Our film memories would mean far less were Hollywood not so brightly aglow tonight. 5 outstanding motion pictures have been nominated as the best films of 1952.
The winner is Cecil B. DeMille.
All right, what a year. And this was a kind of a tough one. It was a 2-movie race. One of them I knew it was going to come down to. The other one came completely out of left field for me. But I will kind of go with the critic consensus, and I would have given the nod to High Noon. I think High Noon was one of those movies that transcends time, one of the all-time best movies, best westerns of all time, if you will, and a great kind of cerebral film. What do you do when these forces are oppressing you kind of film. that ekes out Moulin Rouge, which I was very, very blown away by as far as being impressed. I've never seen Moulin Rouge in my life before, and I really thought it was a really great character study and a great kind of look into Paris at the turn of the century. Those two were my top two. Quiet Man, I thought, was a very good movie as well. It just didn't quite lead up to the class of the other two. However, it did have the whimsical moments that I liked. I liked that film. The one thing I really obviously agree with the critics on was The Greatest Show on Earth was not a good movie. It was not that good. As far as the worst movie to win Best Picture, I don't know if it was or not. Still got a lot more reviews to do, but it definitely, in my opinion, did not deserve it in this year. And I know that Singing in the Rain was also a possibility this year, and it never got a nomination for Best Picture either. Perhaps in the future I'll do a One More Movie podcast where I watch movies from a year of the Academy Awards that weren't nominated for Best Picture, and see what should have been nominated for Best Picture if I had one more vote to do, but that's far down the road, obviously. But I just thought that High Noon was the Best Picture winner, followed on its heels by Moulin Rouge for the Academy Awards in 1953. So that'll wrap up the How I Would Have Voted podcast for the 25th Academy Awards from 1953. We'll pick another year next time.
Big hand to a wonderful guy and one of our great actors who's been doing the color on this show tonight, Ronald Reagan, right here. Ronnie, come out here.